see. Turn down the background music and say hello. Is it stopping? Oh, yeah, it did. Okay, hello, good morning. My name is Zach Whalen and I'm streaming from my class, DGST 101. I am back to streaming. I had to take some time off, but I'm here now. So hopefully if you're watching, you are in my class. Hopefully if you are in my class, you are watching this either live or after the fact. Either one is fine. I just see one viewer listed in my dashboard of current viewers. So whoever you are, hello, thanks for watching live. It's always nice to hear who's out there. So if you don't mind saying hi in your either the Twitch chat or the live stream chat, whichever, that's fine. But if not, that's fine too. I mean, I'm mainly broadcasting this so that I can have a video that I can share later. So there's a lot to cover today, and I'm going to get through it as quickly as I can. There's a lot to cover because I had to not stream or do any video earlier this week. I think I'm sick still. I've had COVID, so I've been kind of slowed down because of that. It's it's a mild case, I suppose, but it's still not great. And also, I've been participating in an online conference that was in Italy, and so I had been waking up at 2:30 every morning to participate in that in real time with the people there. So that's another reason I'm kind of tired and off, but I'm doing my best, and we're going to get through it. So this is week 3. This is day 3, but it's really I'm going to talk about things that kind of go all through that cover the content that has already been introduced a bit on days 1 and 2 theoretically. I'll do that later. Okay, so I have something. I have an object here. I'm going to talk about. This is my Gameboy. So I'm not ready to do that yet, though. So let me talk a bit about the week and kind of where we are, where you should be, and yeah. I mean, as always, if you have any questions while I'm talking, then go ahead and let me know. So here we are. So this is the week, and I do still think of this in terms of like 4 days of content, and we are on day 3 of content. So in terms of what you should have done by now, you should have learned a bit about the life cycle of digital objects. This is our week focusing on the materiality, the material side of digital culture. So you should have played the phone story game. You should have read the story, the article, Your iPhone Was Made by Slaves. That's the excerpt from Kevin Bale's book. That's available in Perusall. And then yesterday you should have listened to the podcast about Apple and their labor practices, or the labor practices of their supplier, Foxconn. There's one transcript to read and then one episode to listen to from This American Life. So hopefully you've done that and discussed that. I have seen some activity in Discord, but if you're doing that asynchronously on your own time later, that's still okay to do, and just make sure you add your thoughts accordingly and respond to other people's thoughts if they're already in there by the time you arrive. So today that's again, day 1. It was to kind of learn the big picture using that game, Phone Story. Let me just say a couple things about Phone Story, and not much I can show you, but something that some of you may have had a hard time figuring out. I did get a question about this. So it does say play it online, but you actually can't play it online anymore, and that's because Flash, the software that it's programmed in, no longer works in web browsers. There is a big backstory to that, but the basic idea is that you can't just click on it and play it now. Instead, you have to actually download it, and that's easy to do here if you look at these links at the bottom. So there's a version you can download for Mac, there's a version you can download for PC. Unfortunately, if you're gonna have a hard time working on this if you have a Chromebook, and I don't know a reasonable way to play this on a Chromebook at all. Unfortunately, there may be something somebody's developed, some kind of third-party emulator at this point. That's the kind of thing that it seems like there's a need for that, but I don't know if one. I've looked a bit and haven't found one. If you do find one, let me know, because I would love to have that as a resource. Similarly, if your primary way of accessing this is on your phone, you're gonna have a hard time. If you do want to do it on your phone, the easiest way to do it on your phone if you have an Android is to pay for it. You can pay $1.99 and play it in just like an app. But if I understand if you don't want to do that. I will say, as a last resort, so if you are a student in this class, I do want you to experience this content on your own. I do want you to play this game because this is an experiential kind of rhetoric. Like you're going to get the point better if you are the one making the choices and performing the actions that this game asks you to do. If you watch someone else do that, you won't get the same experience of it. So I don't really want you to look for people playing through this on YouTube, but it does exist. And if you've tried everything else and you can't think of anything else to work, then I guess that's better than nothing. But it's only like slightly better than nothing. So really do your best to figure out how to play this on your computer. And if you can't, ask me first. Like, ask me before you decide, oh, I'm just going to look it on YouTube. Like, ask me and I can probably help you figure it out. The only thing I know I probably can't figure out for you is a Chromebook. I've not been able to figure that out. But Macs, PCs, yeah, that should work fine. You just need to download it and run that file, and it should work. Okay, so do that. And then, then also read about your phone made by slaves. Okay, so then for day 2, then the idea was to look at the 2 pieces of content. So let me just kind of link to that to show you a bit about, talk a bit about these. This is 2 episodes of the podcast, This American Life. And you can, first of all, you have to read the transcript for this one. This is because it's no longer available. They've taken this, they've retracted this episode. But it does still exist. Let's see. Yeah, it's Mike Daisy Goes to China. You can click on it there. I forget always how to find the transcripts on here, but they are on here. Act 1. I remember I saw someone had a question too. I'm trying to figure out how do we find this. Maybe it's...
This week on This American Life, Mike Daisy was on an Apple computer fan site and read about a guy who bought an iPhone, and it wasn't blank.
It had information on it from inside the factory. And in fact, in the camera roll, there were pictures.
Yeah, so it should be thisamericanlife.org/454/transcript. So this is the transcript right here. I wonder if my link is... I wonder if I can just... I'm going to change this link to link directly to the transcript to make that easier. So you don't have to worry about finding it. Yeah, and this one, there is a story about why it was retracted, and I think that story is interesting because it has to do with journalism and how journalism is conducted and the sort of the ethics of journalism, which is something that the first story didn't account for very well. And so that's why this retraction exists, and it's important to do that. But in order to understand what is being debated in the retraction episode, you have to read the first one, so you have that context. And then you do hear quite a bit of it in the retraction episode, actually. But I really want you to listen to this episode. One of the kind of secret goals of this week, and this is something that's not like labeled or really a high-level learning goal, but it is kind of a secret learning goal for this week, is to think about how different media communicate information and persuasive information in different ways. So for day 1, you read an essay and played a video game. And as I hope you notice when you think about that game, it tries to teach you something using gameplay mechanics. So that's something that you may not have noticed or thought about before. So the idea of that game is to introduce that to you in addition to the content that it introduces. Similarly, on day 2, my hope is that you'll think about how audio can communicate information and persuasively communicate information sometimes. And I think you hear Mike Daisy, being very persuasive in a certain way in the way he talks, but there's a couple of really interesting moments in the way that this retraction episode is edited, and I really want you to listen to it in order to experience that. One thing in particular is several long, awkward pauses in the conversation, so blank space in the recording that I think are incredibly powerful and uncomfortable, and I really find that interesting that this is something they do here. Typically for audio media, like dead air is like the enemy, like silence is the enemy, but this is silence used really, really effectively. So I really recommend you listen to this and experience it in all of its cringy awfulness, because that's really what it is. Okay, so that's day 2. So today, then, the content to learn about a bit more about the life cycle of these things for day 3 is to think about so the first day looks at the labor of extracting the minerals. The second day looked at labor of producing it, and now for today we're going to look at the future. So the afterlife, the part of your object's life that comes next. And for this, there are 2 pieces of film, 2 documentary videos that are talking about the same thing basically, but in different ways and using different rhetorical appeals. And I'm interested in that. So again, this is that secret learning goal for the week, thinking about how different media make different kind of rhetorical appeals. This is another chance to think about that. And we've got two things to look at. The first is, these are both on YouTube. So this is a PBS NewsHour, it's the NewsHour, and so this is like a segment on the NewsHour, but it's constructed like a short documentary. And it's a story about what really happens to your recycled e-waste. This is from 2016, I guess. Then this is a film from 2012, and this is a very different approach. It's slightly longer, but you should watch the whole thing, and it's compelling, I think. But compelling for different reasons, and that's the main thing I want you to notice, is that for the, they're different. And so I've got a link here that explains the different kinds of rhetorical appeals that are available. This is, the study of rhetoric is an entire academic discipline, and you can take many different courses on it. I don't mean to kind of gloss over that exactly, but here's a quick Wikipedia article that kind of breaks down some of the basic things that you're appealing to. So you can appeal to ethos, which would be appeal to the authority or the credibility of the person talking. So after you've looked at these two, which do you think is doing that? You can also appeal to emotions. After you've looked at these two films, which of these two is appealing to those emotions? You can also look at logos, which has to do with the logic of it. I don't know that logos and kairos are going to be that relevant here, but if you see some application of it, that's great. Mainly, ethos versus pathos would be a great, I think that'll be the most immediate distinction you'll be able to make between those two. So I'm interested in what you think about that and how well these films do each of those respectively. Okay, so that's the kind of thing I'd like for you to do. And also, as you do that, think about, I kind of like to do this. So for when we're talking about film, one way to respond to it is to, break it down a bit. And often a way to break it down is to turn some part of it into a GIF. So I've got a suggestion here in the assignment notes for today, and I've also, I think I have a slide about that. I don't remember. But still a little foggy here, but Imager is one of many different websites you can use to convert or to clip a GIF out of a video. So what you do is you copy the URL like this and paste it in right here, and then you submit it. And it's not foolproof. Sometimes it doesn't work, but what it does basically is it pulls up the entire film here, and then you can kind of scroll to a particular point that you're interested in and make a GIF out of it. Obviously this is just a random moment that I skimmed to, but if there's some particular moment that you found interesting, emotionally effective, or whatever response you want to have to this, once you find a spot, hit create a GIF. I just picked a random spot, I guess, and there's a few more steps after this, but eventually you'll end up with a GIF, and you can share that in Discord to share with other people what you thought about that particular moment and why you chose that moment. Okay, so and then tomorrow we're going to talk about kind of completing the object lesson assignment. In terms of that kind of nuts and bolts stuff, today I'm going to be mainly talking about the research side of it, and then tomorrow I'll be talking about the presentation side of it. So I'm going to save some of that till tomorrow, but I will introduce a bit about the platform that you're going to be using to share your work. Okay, lots of stuff here. So yeah, let me just kind of move through this. Okay, so, I guess I already had a slide for this. So here's your two videos to watch. I've got them embedded in here. There's no need to really pull them up here. But they're both fairly short, so I expect you should be able to watch both of them efficiently.
You buy a new smartphone or
in the browser. I don't know why Slides does that. Like, why would I ever want to do that? Okay, so again, breaking these things down, here's some things you might notice about these. I've given you some suggestions, but these are incomplete lists because I want you to think about it as well. So, and in this case, I'm not even using technical language, really. I'm just kind of noticing these things, that it's introduced with a narrator who explains things. There's a reporter. There's a host, and there's a reporter, and then there's an expert, several experts, I guess. For e-wasteland, there's not. So what difference does that make? I think it makes a really big difference. So that's the kind of thing there that I think connects it to appealing to emotion. Anyway, these are things you can talk about in the Discuss E-Waste channel, or if you want to make a blog post responding to it, that would be great too. A lot of people, I will say, a lot of students have found these two, especially e-wasteland, pretty striking, pretty compelling emotionally, and they have a lot to say about it. So if that's something that you want to write about in a blog post, that's always great. That's always a fine alternative to using Discord. Okay, yeah, and then I just have a couple of explanations here about this here. The tool using the imager.com/vidgif. Other websites that make GIFs have tools like this. Giphy, Giphy, Giphy.com, they have one. But at least last time I tried to use it, there's the video that you load from YouTube has to be like 10 minutes or less, or so. There's some time limit. And since eWasteland is 20 minutes, then it didn't work on that one. So, your mileage will vary with any of these tools. If you have an issue with one or you find a better one that works, then let us know in Discord. Okay, let's talk about the object lesson project. Now, I've got an assignment description, of course, in Canvas. This assignment description is kind of lengthy because I'm kind of teaching the content of what you should be learning as you work on this in the assignment description. So there's quite a bit here, and so I'm not going to go through the text here. I'm going to go through some slides that cover the same kind of thing. Just a couple notes here. If you are looking for a device, like your first step is going to be to choose a device. And so you do need to make a good choice about this. And if you want some advice about it, if you have a particular object, you're not sure if it's a good object or not, let me know. Give me a chance to give you some feedback on it. I will say generally the older the better, because if it's older, it's going to be easier to take apart. A lot of times students have an old smartphone, or you may have a drawer full of old phones or something. And you might think, okay, I don't need these. Let me just take one of these apart. That is possible, and you can do okay with the assignment if you're doing that. The issue with those, there are a couple issues with those. One is that they're very small, and so they're hard to take apart safely. You usually need special tools. Those special tools are pretty easy to come by, but like you can usually get like a smartphone repair kit is usually what they call it, for like $5 at Home Depot or something. But unless you already have that, you'd have to go get it and deal with that. The other thing too is like sometimes they have glass, and it's if you've already got a broken screen, like that's why it's in that drawer. It's very you got to be careful with that glass. You might need to take that glass off in order to get to the insides, the interesting parts on the insides. And I don't want you to do that. The other more dangerous thing with smartphones is if they have a lithium battery and you poke a hole in that lithium battery, you can cause a fire. So I really don't recommend that either. Obviously, those are all kind of things. So ideally, you want something, again, that you can take apart and that you can take apart safely. So that's why I've got some things kind of scrolling through here that I think are good suggestions. I happen to have with me today my Gameboy, and so I'm going to show you a couple things about taking this apart. If you don't have a Gameboy, that's understandable. These are, I don't know if these are collector's items yet, except, I think it's an antique technically. The Game Boy, this is the 1989 Game Boy, so the original Game Boy. This one I believe I acquired in 91 or 92, but this is mine, and I've taken it apart, put it back together a few times, so I'm not too worried about that. But as you can see, it's got Pokemon in it right now. I was too old for Pokemon when it first came out, and I have Pokemon Blue for some reason. But my kids are obviously, they really like it, so they play this game a lot on this Game Boy. Okay, so it's got a lot of screws to loosen, so I'm just kind of doing that. I'm starting that process a little bit while I'm still talking. But if you have a newer Game Boy, maybe that's okay. Discman, things are good like that. I've got various game-related things here. VCRs are okay. The issue with VCRs is they are hard to put back together. They have a lot of moving parts and gears in them, so it's really kind of hard to get those teeth back together. Also, all those moving parts will have grease on them, so if you take it apart, you will get grease on you, so you need to wear gloves to do that safely. The big warning, and this is the main thing, is don't take apart anything that has a CRT screen in it. And you probably don't have things like that anymore. I mean, those are harder. I mean, those are rare, but if you have like an old Mac computer, let's say, or if you have a Vectrex game system, it's in, where is it? It's around here somewhere. Those have built-in CRTs, and those can be very dangerous to deal with at all. Like if you poke it in the wrong place, it could electrify you, and they could be fatal even. So don't, even if it's not plugged in. So please don't take apart anything with a screen like that. Really, yeah. If you have any questions about your device or any hesitation about it, then run it by me, and I'm glad to advise. Okay, so here's what we're doing with this. You are going to be learning about three phases of this object's life. So there's a prehistory, which I think of as the time before you owned this device. I think of the lived history, which is what you do with it as you have it. And then the part 3 is the afterlife, which is what happens after you no longer need it, after you're done with it. So the amount of time you spend on each of these is going to vary. So as I explain this, there are lots of like, if this, then that kind of explanations, because there's just so many different choices and options. But if you think about an object that you actually own, the prehistory can be pretty interesting to learn about. The lived history is something you already just know because you have it, like you remember it, hopefully, or you can like ask around or look up dates of things or whatever. And then the afterlife, either way, is going to be speculative, but it's going to be something that you have some educated guesses that you can make, and I'm going to talk about how to do that. Ultimately, you're trying to come up with around 15 events, and that's what each of the findings are going to be characterized as an event. So there's an asterisk next to 15. 15 is not like a hard minimum, and you fail if you don't get 15. I'm just saying that's what you should shoot for. And so that's going to be a handful of events from each of these life cycles. But my assumption is that you will spend a lot more time on one of these. And which one that is depends on your device, depends on your interest, depends on what you find when you start doing this research. So I'm not going to say which it has to be, but you should just kind of think about 15 as being like, that's when I'm done, basically. Think about that. And when I think about an event, again, our idea here is to learn about this device, not the Game Boy as a product by Nintendo, but this Game Boy as the one I had when I was 12. So this is how we get there, is by getting really specific with the events that we know about this. So I'm thinking, when I think about when, I'm thinking like year, month, down to the day if you can, maybe even the time in some cases, but as specific as possible. Like for each event, as narrowly as possible as you can define that. So don't say sometime in the 1980s or sometime in 27, well, if the best you can say is sometime in 2017, that's better than nothing. But ideally, you want to try to get down to the month of the year. And that's usually possible. And I'll show you what I mean when I get to that step. And then also, you want to figure out the street, like the location where this event happened. So when you're looking at the prehistory, the steps, the events you're mostly going to be talking about are the assembly of the different, the assembly dates of the specific individual components that make up the device. Those will be different. And you can often figure it out down to the level of street address and even pull it up on Google Maps of where this particular fabrication happened. So make sure you do that as much as you can. So don't just say something like, oh, it's somewhere in Asia, right? Because that's not very specific, and there are lots of places in Asia. Also, lots of these things are not made in Asia. So, there are, of course, well-established manufacturing facilities in Asia and different Asian countries, but there are different countries in Asia, and they have different manufacturers involved in those. So these are things that I expect you to be as specific as possible. And as we get into that kind of research, by the way, just the one thing to note is I don't know about your device. So when you're doing this investigation, you're going to be making the case that this is the best information you could find about this. And I'm not really going to be able to say like, well, actually, here's this other thing. Actually, this facility is somewhere else. I might know those things. I probably don't. So I'm really, I've called this research. This is more of an investigation. Like you're doing this, you're kind of going into primary sources and documents in some cases to figure out like, when did this thing happen and where did it come from? That's like as long as you can convince me that you've done your best, then that's good enough. Now, if you do something and you say that's my best, but then I show you like, well, why didn't you do did you actually Google it, for example? Like there are sometimes next steps that I know about that I can say you should have done, but mostly I trust you to tell me what you've done and what you think the best information is. Okay, so again, so looking at the steps here. So step 1, remember, was choose the object. Step 2, start doing the investigations, and then ultimately you're going to start you have to document your findings. So let's look at what those findings would look like for those different phases. So remember, there's the 3 phases: prehistory, lived history, afterlife. For a prehistory event, you might be able to say something as specific as this: that this was. Okay, interesting. I have different information about this particular chip in that picture. I don't think this is correct for this chip. Anyway, I will show you that in a minute. But this is what you want to know about it, which is when was this chip assembled, where was it assembled, and what actually is it. So that's the idea. And again, you want to get several of these. The number of these is going to vary depending on what you actually have when you open up your device. So several would be great. 3, 4, 5 would be great. Okay, so then if you're looking at the lived history, so this is where these things actually happen. So again, we're looking for an event. So I've picked a date here, December 25th, 2011. I'm kind of making up a story here for this particular object. This is a Guitar Hero 2 controller. And in this case, this is your life. You know these things. I don't know these things. So you just have to convince me and be as honest, I guess, and as specific as possible when you tell me these things. Now, one thing, you notice I've got these GPS coordinates here. I don't actually remember what those GPS coordinates point to. Since you will be making this public, if you would rather not include the latitude and longitude position of the home where you grew up, I understand that. And so if you just want to say generically like my mom's house or something like that, that would be fine. But this is the level of specificity that I want you to think about. It's like a specific event. It's not just like, well, I had it for a while and I played it, but like, here's a time when I played it. Here's something I remember with this particular thing. So this thing, this is a pretty old thing, but I still remember pretty specific things. I don't remember like the exact date off the top of my head, but I could guess and I could pick a plausible date for my timeline. Like I remember going on a long road trip when I was 12 or 13. I must have been 12. And I had just gotten this. So that's kind of how I remember when I got this. And I had just gotten a game called Boxel. And I remember playing it in that car as we drove from Knoxville, Tennessee to Charleston, South Carolina. And I played it pretty much the whole time. So it's something that can be done. That's the kind of thing that I'd like for you to try to come up with about your object. Okay, so then finally the Afterlife. This is a... this is going to be some educated guesswork, and you can be pretty creative with this. One of the things you're going to be aware of as you do this is the different materials. So if you're thinking about this device ending up in a landfill, let's say that's the future you imagine for it, then you can be specific, well, within some reasonability, about like what's going to happen to the different parts of it over time as they break down into their raw materials, back down into their raw materials. And this was where you can look up, like you can figure out what kind of plastic is it made out of, what is the the life cycle of this kind of plastic, and you may find that it's 30,000 years or something. But that's something you can put on a timeline. Like you can say like this is July 1st, and I've done that here. So this is July 1st. I don't know. That's in 500. What year would that be? 550 billion. I don't know. I can't really read the number of zeros there, but that's the kind of thing that you can guess about, and that's fine. Obviously, we won't be around then, so I won't be there to verify whether or not your Gameboy still exists. I just realized the screen's missing. There's a screen cover that's supposed to be on this. Like it's a thin piece of plastic, but it has the branding on it. I need to find that. Okay. My kids play with this a lot. Okay, so thinking about what this starts to look like when you put it together on a timeline. Remember, I assume that you're going to probably focus on one of these three more than the other three, but all three need to be represented somehow. Here's how it might look if you're focusing on the prehistory. You notice I'm using color codes here just to show you that you would still include events for the lived history and the afterlife, but you would include more events for the prehistory, and that's okay. Similarly, for the lived history, you definitely still need to include some prehistory. You still need to include some afterlife, at least one of each. But you've got, you can spend more on the time on the lived history if you'd like. And then finally, if you just focus on the afterlife, same kind of thing. You need to include at least one event from the prehistory, one event from the lived history, and then you can do more from the other ones. Okay, let's talk about taking this thing apart and what you're looking for when you do this. So I'm going to start doing this here. I've got a few more screws to go. So Game Boys are Nintendo devices, obviously, and Nintendo devices have a special set of screws and things that you need. I'm going to try to do this without losing any of them. you won't be able to see if I hold this up on the camera, but this is a tri-wing screwdriver, and it's kind of like, you can imagine how a Phillips head screw looks. It's got kind of it's like a plus sign, so it's got like little grooves or channels going off in 4 directions. The tri-wing is like that, but 3. So it's like 3 of these things. I call it a tri-wing. I don't know if that's the technical term. And these are tiny screws, so they're kind of hard to get out. Come on. So, there it goes. Thought I had it loosened all the way, it just wasn't sliding out. Oh, I got 3 people online now. Hope you're enjoying me unscrew this. All right. So, of course, if you have, if you're doing any kind of work on small electronics, you need to think about how you set up your space. I didn't really think ahead too much here, but it's nice to have some kind of mat or something that's like that lets you spread stuff out. And then also like little cups, like just little paper cups or something, are good for holding your screws. And if you have different kinds of screws, I recommend putting them in different cups. Kind of common sense, but it's something you don't think about until it's too late sometimes. When you've got a pile of screws and you don't remember where a thing came from. So I'll show you this whenever I get this done. Okay, I think this is the last screw for this part. And this is probably all I need to undo for today. Yeah, okay. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna just kind of hold this up here. This opens like a clamshell, and I know you can't see it super well, but let me kind of make myself bigger here for a bit, make my camera bigger so I can show these things. Yeah, it's pretty interesting on the inside actually. There's this little ribbon here that's how the imagery gets from the components to the actual screen, and you can take this ribbon out if you're really careful. I mean, I don't think it's that fragile really, but there we go. Makes it a lot easier to handle. All right, so ultimately, like, our goal is we're trying to understand this as a more complicated device than we take it for granted to be, which is this is not just some sort of single object. This is actually an assembly of multiple objects, and each of those objects has a material history, a history of labor, and a history of human involvement in each of those steps. One of the interesting things I find about this one, and this is the case when I took this apart. Sorry, I'm huge. I don't know if this will focus on that, but that copper plate there, which is part of the shielding, actually has some fingerprints on it, and these are not mine. I saw those when I took this apart for the first time, and so those indicate the record or the trace of someone else that has been inside of this device, the person who, or people who manufactured it. They, I guess, weren't wearing gloves, and they put this together, I can tell, in 1991 or so, and I have no idea who that person was, but they are a person, they are a specific person, and they have a history and a life, and it has contacted mine in this really, interesting and kind of intimate way. There are other components to this too. The other thing I want you all to learn about is the fact that these are not just single monolithic objects, but they actually have lots of components. So it's an assembly of different components, and each of these components is likely made at a different place, then shipped to a single place to be assembled for the final product. And so there's a lot that goes into each of these. I see I actually need a Phillips head screw to get past the next point here. So this is the back of it, and it's greening out because my green screen is actually picking up the green here. But this is a printed circuit board, and there are several interesting chips on it on the other side, and so I want to show you those. So I'm going to go get my Phillips head screwdriver and show you that. There should be just 2 screws to do. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, I should have just brought my whole toolkit out here. I have a little toolbox of all the little electronics related tools. If you do want to work on a smartphone, by the way, like I said, you can get different kits, and there's a couple of different like electronic repair kits that I've used that I like, and mainly to just have like lots of different kinds of screw heads. This one's stripped. Oh, dang it. I'm going to get a bigger... I need to get a bigger screwdriver. This screw has been... I must have done this before with this one, because this is going to strip that out. So, okay, I'm going to go get the bigger screwdriver. But yeah, I was saying there's different kits, and I'll show you. I'll bring my whole kit back when I come back. All right, I'm back. I can't find my kit. My son has been interested in this kind of thing, so he may have borrowed it. But I did find a screwdriver that seems to be working. It's one of these big fat boy guys. It works well though it's got a sharp enough point. So okay, this part I have to be careful about. Ooh. The power button falls off on these sometimes. That's okay. So let's see if I can. Yeah. Okay, so here's the good stuff. So there's what I'm looking for. These are a number of integrated circuits, microchips, whatever you want to call them, the black rectangles. And I know that it's sort of hard to see here. Let me just kind of. As you can see, hopefully, there is some writing on these. This is a green square printed circuit board, and then there are 3 relatively large chips that have text printed on them. And that's what I'm going to be using to investigate. That's what you will need for yours if you're trying to investigate their origins. Yeah, and I mean, I've done this before for these, so I know these already, but it's mainly the CPU. And then there's, I think the other 2 are like memory. So it's pretty things you might expect here, but pretty cool to look at and try to figure out where these individual things came from, when and where they were manufactured. And they were, it turns out, manufactured relatively close to the assembly date for this object, but it certainly predated the Game Boy as an object by a few months or years. So yeah, that's the kind of thing. You're trying to understand a more complex history of what you're looking for. So I have some slides. Oh, I'm still huge. Hang on. I have some slides that will show you the kind of information you're looking for in some more detail, so I don't have to like hold it up towards the camera here. This is an example of what you'll see, and this is an example of how hard it is sometimes to figure out what's going on with this based on the writing. So this is a chip. I think this was from a Guitar Hero controller, but this is an example of a chip that I was not able to find out much about because there's just not that much information on it. Like there's not much information visually there. remember you're looking for where, when, and what. And so there are some things you can use if you have something that's a large enough chip that has enough information on it that you can use. And that's, again, another suggestion that sometimes smartphones are harder to work with because the chips are very small in a lot of cases, and there's not a lot of room for writing. If there is writing, it's often very, very small writing, and so you need a magnifying glass literally to look at it sometimes. So, these are things where your mileage will vary, as I always say. But I want to show you how I was able to figure out some things just this morning based on this chip, and show you how you can do this research yourself if you get to this point in your prehistory investigation. So here's a chip. I don't remember what this, I think this was from the Guitar Hero controller. I don't remember. But I took a picture of it. You should take a picture of each component that you investigate. And so we can look at it a little bit here just to kind of just make some general observations before going into some detail about it. It's got this sort of yellow blob, some kind of marker maybe, or some kind of putty. It's got sort of like what looks like a crayon mark. Those might be quality control steps at some point. There might have been someone whose job it was to make sure it worked, and so they wrote this or drew this on there to mark that it was working, or maybe that it was something else. So good suggestion there from Pick Radio in the chat. If you were looking at a device like a Gameboy, it's popular enough that people have done this already with much better cameras and equipment than I have, and so you can find a lot of really good stuff doing that. Now, for this project, you should still try to learn about the chips on your specific device, but those YouTube videos can be really helpful to show you how to get to those particular things. And you can also find actually websites where people have just listed all of the details of each of the chips for their Game Boys, and it's pretty interesting. But a Game Boy being a very popular device means a lot of people are interested in this history. You may have a device that's not super popular, and so it might not be as interesting, and there might not be as much of that. But definitely a lot of really good YouTube videos on tearing things down. Okay, so let's start looking at some of the things that are here that we can learn about. The first one, a good one to start with, is the manufacturer logo. This is the one in the top. In this case, it's in the top left. This is going to be a little picture, a little pictogram, a little logo of some sort, and this is going to identify who made this particular chip. It is not necessarily, and probably is not, the same company that made the device. So in other words, this is a Game Boy in my case, and I don't remember where this chip here came from, but I can tell you, I already know it's not the same company that made the chip. The way it works is, like, let's say you have a game console that you're trying to sell, you contract with a company, some other company, to make all the chips for you, and those companies make those chips, or maybe they already make them, maybe they already have that kind of chip that you need, and they have millions of them already in stock, and so you just buy them from them. These are separate companies, and so they are going to be different. So Nintendo does its own, or did its own, maybe they probably still do, but they did their own fabrication for these, I believe, for the Nintendo CPU, the Game Boy CPU. The other ones, though, are made by Sharp Electronics, which is a different company. So, now this one, the Sharp is easy to tell because for Sharp, the logo is literally just the word Sharp, so that's easy. A lot of cases, these logos are just pictures, and unless you know what the picture is, or like what the company already is, you can't just Google, like what even is that? Like, it's hard to even tell what this is a picture of. So you can't there's no text you can enter. I tried a reverse image Google search on this just out of curiosity and didn't come up with anything. So that's not likely going to work. What will work usually is instead to find a list. There's a few of these. I think I've listed a link to this one in the assignment description, but you can find others if you just Google like semiconductor logos. And there are different things like this, and you literally just have to visually scan it. Just like scroll down until you see what you're looking for. I happen to already know what I'm looking for, so that's easier for me because I've already done this, but you just have to go visually line by line basically until you see what you want. Sometimes you can type a vague description into Google and you might come up with something that's close, but that's hard to do. It's sort of a luck of the draw kind of thing. I will tell you that some of the ones that are very common that you see, Matsushita, Panasonic, these M's with squares around them, or the kind of stylized triangle, those are very common. You will see a lot of those. Same with Marvel or Marvell, I don't know how you'd say that. Texas Instruments is also very common and also very easy to identify because it is the shape of Texas. Hewlett Packard with the HP, right? These are logos you'll probably recognize from other places. A lot of these, though, you probably won't. And I can tell you, the one that I have here, this is actually, where is it? yeah, Cypress. So Cypress Semiconductor. And you can see there's two different options. It's kind of small, but let me zoom in on that. So the one is kind of it's like a streaky synthwave kind of sun with a like tree in front of it. And that's what I have on my chip. So that's the match here. That's this thing. That's this right here. So pretty good. Then the next step is to figure out, okay, what is the deal with Cypress Semiconductor? This particular listing has a link to it, and if you click on it, what's interesting is it actually takes you to Infineon.com, not some other website. And so that's already giving me some information here, which is that and this is also the case for a lot of older things, is that the companies that made those, they change their names, they buy each other out, and so sometimes you'll find that actually the information about a particular company is not available on their website. They may not have a website anymore, but you can find information on the website of the company that bought them, in this case Infineon. So this is pretty good, but now that I have a name, I can also just search for it, right? So it's Cypress Semiconductor. And if I do that, it turns out they do have, well, actually they do have a website still. And they've been bought out, but this is still their website. They have a Wikipedia page, so you can learn from this Wikipedia page that they sold to Infineon in 2020. So their information is still up and is still operating. I think it looks like they're still operating under the name Cypress, but they are owned by Infineon. But anyway, they've got quite a bit of information about the background here. This is actually really good. I mean, this is sort of the striking gold, sort of, in terms of this kind of investigation. You don't normally get this sort of this much information from Wikipedia about these manufacturers. When you don't, the thing that you can do instead is look at their websites and then see what they say about themselves on their website. A lot of times they'll tell you about their operations. Remember, our goal is to figure out, like, okay, now that I kind of know the company that made this, where did they make this? And you can start coming up with that list of places if you look at their list of locations. I'm just looking at their website here, so we'll see what they say. And so, yeah, I'm looking at Infineon now. So you notice it took me to the Infineon.com, and I'm looking for production locations. So this gives me a nice looking map of several production locations. Looks like quite a few in Malaysia, Thailand, okay, and then but also quite a few in the US. So the question though is, like, Infineon owns other companies. Infineon is a company its own, so these are not all Cypress locations. So that's something that I need to do some more research on to figure out. The other thing that is nice about there being a website here, a Wikipedia page, is that it has some links to, it actually talks about their facilities, like their locations. So you can essentially look at the list of locations and do some educated guesswork to kind of narrow it down to, like, what is the likely origin of this particular chip. And here's an interesting Wikipedia article. This is it's a list page. It's not an article. This is a list of fabrication plants around the world for many different companies. So not just Cypress, but it does include Cypress. But as you scroll down, you got tons of stuff here. So there's a pretty good chance that once you figure out the name of your chip manufacturer, you can probably come to this page here and find it. There's a ton. Let me just see if they have, like, TI. Yeah, so Texas Instruments, right? So that's a big one, obviously, in the U.S. You've got, Samsung has a bunch, right? So there's a lot. So you can learn a tremendous amount here. So let's show you how to do it. So I'm looking for Cypress. So it lists two for Cypress. There is what it calls Skywater technology, and it says that's in Minnesota, Bloomington, Minnesota. So there's that option. There's also a different one that is now named Infineon in Austin, Texas. So that's I have two that I'm pretty confident are possible origins for this. And these are both started at the right time. So this one was started in 94 and the other one was in 91. This chip I know was made in 2007. Now, yeah, I think this is a 200 millimeter wafer. That's the other thing you can use to try to figure out which of these is likely, but both of them are capable of producing this kind of chip, I believe, if I'm reading this correctly. So the next thing you want to do is figure out, okay, where in Austin, Texas, where in Bloomington, Minnesota. The name of the one in Austin is Fab 25. So let's go to Google Maps and let's go to Austin. And in Austin, Texas, now that we're here on the map, let's search for Fab 25. And there we go, Infineon Technologies. This is it. And I can kind of just do a quick kind of sanity check, because a lot of times an address will be like an office. So this chip would not have come through an office. It would have come straight out of a fabrication facility, straight out of a factory. So you need to kind of look at this and make sure it looks like a factory. And I pulled up the satellite view here. This definitely looks like a factory. Like it's a big square rectangle. And if you want to get this one has street view, so I can go down here and see, okay, does this look like a factory? Yes, this definitely looks like a factory to me. So I feel pretty confident that this is a possible location. And now that I have this exact location, I have the GPS coordinates in the map. I could include this in my timeline, like this is where it came from. I need to do a little bit more kind of thinking to decide if this is the origin place. So the other one to look at here, I guess, is the Minnesota one. Now, I do also know Cypress has facilities in the Philippines and Thailand and other places. So, I don't know why those aren't on this list. I don't know for sure that this is a complete list. So I would also want to look at some of those too, before I was very confident in that. Let's take a look at, where is it, Bloomington, Minnesota. I don't know anything about Bloomington, Minnesota, but there it is. And the name of this facility is the Minnesota Fab. Okay. Fab. Okay, so Fab Craft, metal fabrication equipment. Plastics, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, Polar Semiconductor, that's interesting. That's a different name, but that did come up. I mean, that is the right kind of thing. Let's just see what this looks like. It's a smaller factory, but it looks like a factory. Yeah, it does look like it could be it could be manufacturing. It definitely looks smaller though. So I am not so sure about this one. Oh, well, if that's big, is that the same facility or is this a different building? This okay, that definitely looks like a factory. So yeah, this has a different name, but it is a semiconductor factory in the right city. It could be that they've changed their name since this Wikipedia page was written. These are Wikipedia pages, and they can certainly change. Oh wait, no, this one says it's Skywater Technology, which was formerly Cypress, which was formerly Controlled with Data, which was formerly VTC. So maybe it's Poland. What is it? Polar. Let's see, what was it called? Skywater? It's a weird name if you think about it. What is Skywater? Skywater is cloud. Okay, here's their Skywater Technology. Oh, okay, here it is. So this looks like that looks like another factory. So this could just be the sort of semiconductor side of town. And this is, there we go. That looks like the right thing. And there it is. You can see the Cypress logo right on the building. Oh, great. In fact, you know what's cool, actually? Okay, so there's the Cypress logo. It's really blurry, but that's the same logo on my chip. And check it out. So the next thing I was going to show you is the date code. So if you look at the date code here, a date code is usually a 4-digit number, sometimes 3 digits, sometimes it's 4 numbers plus some letters. Here's a web page that explains some differences in how to interpret date codes. In this case, I'm pretty sure this is the date code for this particular chip because this was a Guitar Hero 2 controller. So I'm pretty sure that this is a year, week date code, which is the most common. So the first 2 digits are the digits of the year, in this case 2007, and then 49 would be the 49th week of the year, so December. And that, if that's true, if that's 2007, that means that this Google Street View picture was taken just a few weeks before that. And if this is the location where that chip came from, this is like this Google car was pretty close to this chip when it was there. So I've got this interesting little connection possibly. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing. So let me go back to the date code thing. Like I said, date codes, they're going to be different. And so but the most common is 4. So if you see a 4-digit number, see if it makes sense to think of it as some part of that as the year. Like you'll probably kind of generally know when this thing was made or whatever. So you can usually get an educated guess, right? So that's a way you can say, okay, well, 49 doesn't make sense as the year because this is clearly newer than 1949. 07 is a possibility. 07 could also be the month, or the week. So you have to kind of look at the information against each other. But in this case, this was pretty easy to infer that that's the year. And you can see this is how they're breaking that down on these different chips. So that's the idea for the date code. If you come across something you think is a date code, but you're not sure how to interpret it, then share it with me, or use the technical the troubleshooting channel in Discord. I mean, that's something I'm happy to help you try to puzzle out. It's kind of a puzzle. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so in figuring out what this is, the big number at the top is going to be the useful thing. Those are usually the longest number that you see is usually going to be the part number. And there's a difference between a part number and a serial number. A serial number would identify this exact chip. The part number would identify what kind of chip is this. And that's what we're interested in here. Like, what is this thing? And this is probably the only thing we're actually searching for it on Google or DuckDuckGo will actually yield something. So if you go to web search and you find this, in this case, this worked. I just typed those letters and numbers in here and comes up with this thing, correctly identifying it as a Cypress Semiconductor product. And then it tells me quite a bit about it. It tells me that this is a USB interface, and that's kind of all I need to know about it. If you want, there's usually something called a data sheet, and you can break it down and you can get a ton of detail about it. The reason that these kinds of sheets exist is, like, let's say you're designing a new kind of controller, like game controller or something, and you need some kind of controller some kind of internal control for the USB interface for it. You might need a chip like this, and so you would need to shop around to decide which chips do you need that'll fit your specifications, and here's a list of the specifications for this chip. So these kinds of things are relatively easy to find, in the sense that people that manufacture chips, companies that manufacture chips, put this information out there for people to find that might need to purchase these chips. So there's a whole kind of marketplace aspect to that. But for this assignment, as long as you're able to name it, that's great. I mean, this is apparently a low-speed USB comm. Like, that's what this is. So I assume that has to do with how, like, I believe this was a Wii controller, so it probably has to do with that interface between the Wii remote and the Guitar Hero controller part of it. So, that part, it's hard to say in terms of exactly what it's for, but that's fine. We just know that this is a USB controller chip, and it was made by Cypress Technologies, probably in, now I don't have, it's hard to say between Minnesota or Texas. That's something I'm just going to make the educated guess, and this is not that educated, I suppose, but I'm going to say it's probably in Minnesota, and then, we'll go from there. Now, whenever you get to these steps, whenever you get to the point where you're feeling that you're at the end of your investigation, like you've got to as far as you think is reasonable to go, or as far as you can go, you need to document how you know. Like, how do I know that that's what I know? And as you can see over here in my browser, I got a bunch of tabs open. And these are the tabs that I used to, not that one, but these are the tabs. These are the things that I used to find this. So you need to keep track of each of these tabs, each of these URLs where you found something. If you found something useful here, if you found something useful on here, copy the URL for this. Keep track of each of these, because in your timeline, I want you to show me, how do you know these things? Like, how do you know, why do you feel confident that this is the right location, or the right time, or the right whatever it is? Okay, so that's what you need to do. And I do recommend documenting it. This is just an example of how you might want to just record this information for your own purposes. In terms of putting it into the timeline.js structure, you'll be doing other things with this data, but you need to have the data first. So I recommend keeping track of it, something like this. So the part number, the description of it, the manufacturer, now that you know that, the location, and you can make these things links to those pages where you found that. That's an easy way to keep track of it, or just make a list of sources, something like that. And this is the how you collect your work for the findings. You can do this in a Google Sheet if you'd like, or Word document. It doesn't really matter. Whatever is convenient for you to keep track of this information. Okay, but that's kind of the investigation part of it. Okay, now I've gone on for over an hour, so I'm going to wrap this up. The thing I will talk about tomorrow is the how you're going to share this, how you're going to make this information something that other people can learn from. And remember, you've got different kinds of things you're going to find out that have to do with the prehistory, the lived history, and the afterlife, right? But whatever you've got, you're going to be putting this into a timeline. And the way that I want you to do this is with something called timeline.js. I want you to do this way because, again, my goal here is specificity. I want you to get as specific as possible, and a timeline is a way to really demonstrate specificity, and you kind of need specificity in order for a timeline to make sense. So that's what I want you to do. Timeline.nightlab.com. This is a widely used tool for conveying this kind of thing. It's a good thing to have some experience with, and it's all accessible through a Google Spreadsheets template. I'll go through the process here just really quickly. You click on this button that says Get Spreadsheet Template, and you literally just, you go here and then you make a copy. And this is the part I'll gloss over for now, which is that you fill in the details that you found. And I'm not going to do that now, but this is, it's got some sample data, so this will at least work. Different options, different things you can do with it, but fill in your data, the information about the particular things you discovered here, and then test it. And so to test it, what you want to do is go to File and then Publish. Where is it? There it is. They've moved this link menu around here. So it's Share, Publish to the Web, and we want to publish the entire thing. And this just changes the access settings on the document. This gives me this here, but I think I don't need that one. I think I need the other one. So I'm just following the instructions here. So File, Publish to the Web, and then the next window, hit Publish, and then, right, yeah, that's what I thought. You don't get this URL, you get this URL. Whoops. This one, this URL. I don't know why, but that's how Google decides to do it. Google makes unusual decisions about how to access their products, and I don't know why. And then paste it in here, and you can set these options, but don't worry about those yet. And those actually, whatever you paste here actually updates the links and the embed information down here below. So this is actually going to preview. This is giving me a preview of the spreadsheet that I just created. This isn't part of the website. If you like, it's easier to see it in its own window, so I'm going to open it here. And just to demonstrate that this is actually working, I'm going to make a change here to make sure that it works. So I'll say my spreadsheet example, and then if I reload this page, yeah, now you'll see that it applied that change. So this is a pretty good way to work, I think. Actually, start with start with the template with working data, and then sort of gradually replace it with your actual data. And the advantage of doing it gradually is that you'll see if something you do messes it up. So if you add something in here and it doesn't, and it causes a problem, you'll know that, oh, that thing that I just did, that was the problem. So let's say, actually one of you sent me your timeline earlier today, and so I saw something that I think is going to cause an error. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to try to cause that error now and then show you how to fix it. So let's say you're just entering these dates off the top of your head and you put November, right? Let's see if that works. Oh, did it work? Oh, okay, maybe it actually works. I was gonna say this might, because like this little warning pops up saying it needs to be a number between 1 and 12. Maybe it doesn't. Oh, there it goes. Okay, I think it just wasn't updated yet. So I'm getting this here: invalid date, month, day, and year must be numbers, right? So that's what I think. It took it a few seconds to catch up with the changes I made to the spreadsheet. So now that I'm here, you can see that, yeah, actually that should be a number, not the word November. And this little tooltip that pops up, I don't know if you can see the tooltip, it might be behind my head, but it says, in fact, the whole row is probably behind my head. Let me move myself over. Here I am. So what I did, this was an 11, and I changed it to the word November, and that's what produced this error. So if I change that to, 11. That should fix that. Just need to make sure to update it. This is not instantaneous. It's a lag of a few seconds, but that's not too bad. So that's how you fix that error if you get that error. All right, well, I'm going to wrap things up. I went on a little bit long, but I had a lot to cover, kind of covering essentially 3 days in one. So that's not bad if you think of it that way. I will be online again tomorrow with the final steps, and I'll spend most of tomorrow talking about how to get the most out of and how to use the timeline.js tool here to convey your timeline. Okay, well, thanks for watching. If you are in the class, you know, whether you're watching this live or after the fact, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, of course, please let me know. You know, I'm always happy to help. That's what my job is. Okay, well, I'm going to switch to my outro scene and wish you all a good day. Mic off to the side here. All right, that's all for now. Have a good afternoon.